Is XRP on the precipice of becoming the most profitable crypto in the entire digital asset sector? XRP ETFs, stablecoins in the US, and now Wall Street investing in digital assets. For the first time in history, we can talk about, will XRP dethrone Ethereum, becoming the top altcoin in all of crypto? And Mario, there's a common saying, you come at the king, you best not miss. And a lot of powerful people in the crypto community have been coming at not only the XRP ledger, but the overlying company in Ripple for going out and acquiring real world companies with the billions of dollars that they have sitting on their balance sheets. Today, we're going to break down a plethora of details showing our listeners how even if you're just entering the XRP community, our brightest days are in front of us towards the back end of 2025. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Good Evening Crypto, your favorite crypto news related channel. If you enjoyed this content, smash that like button and subscribe, as you're going to get an update every single day, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. And we're going to dive into the details right here with a billionaire crypto investor in Raoul Pal calling XRP the moron trade he's predicting millions of investors will make. Here it is.
Sorry, but people are going to buy XRP and Doge and Cardano, whether you like it or not, because they're cheap in the absolute term of how much you pay for a token. So people will do that. The alt layer ones that are getting absolute network adoption, Solana, Sui, a few others, great. And then somewhere in the middle, we'll see what happens. But I think the middle part is the harder play. Hey, I've got this DeFi token that could be amazing. That's pretty hard. There's some idiot-proof ones, which is big layer ones that get adoption, go up a lot, and they're less risky. And the moron trade, which is always a good one, which is just buy the cheapest thing and the top 10.
The moron trade. I like that.
Look at it. In fact, I'm going to show you the moron trade now. And I'm not saying that these are moronic and people are moronic for owning them. I'm talking about when retail come in, what do they look at? Okay, so you're new to crypto. Welcome to crypto. Oh my God, Bitcoin, I can't buy that. It's $116,000. I can barely afford lunch. Ethereum, well, that's pretty expensive. Oh, but XRP, I've heard about that. I saw some videos on YouTube. It's $3.
Boom. And Mario, I think that is the exact analysis that's going to lead to more retail investors owning XRP than some of the products that other ecosystems focus on, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's Ethereum, or even the Solana ecosystem, which was one of the most profitable tokens over these last couple of years. Since the election of Donald Trump, Solana has fallen off in a major way, as XRP is not only the largest United States digital asset, it has the highest amount of demand from what we see in the XRP community. So it's amazing, guys. Mario, what are some of your thoughts?
Super interesting. Like, again, I think that's another clip from our friend Raoul Pal that is not going to age very well, much like that Dino coin theory that he shared probably about a year ago, but he said, don't get left behind. We all love Cardano. We all love XRP, but don't get left behind. And I get what he's saying. People are kind of the new investors. They're going to go down the list. They're going to look at these assets. They're going to say Bitcoin, way too much money. Ethereum, few $1,000s. That's, they don't have that mentality or that knowledge, I guess you could say, that you could buy a partial of a coin. You don't have to buy a whole coin. But it's not a moronic trade. Like, I think that that's completely wrong. I think that where he went wrong in that clip was calling it a moronic trade, because he's basically saying, hey, look, if you're investing in XRP, you're a moron. And, that's not true in my opinion. I think that XRP, the asset, is pretty much not just proven itself, but established. There's so much value already being implemented with the XRPL. There's already so many developments happening with the XRPL, much like there is with Bitcoin, much like there is with Ethereum, and much like there is even with Solana. So we shouldn't be calling it moronic. If anything, we should be calling it lack of research, just sort of like going with the flow down the list type of scenario. But I think that that's not going to age well for Raoul Pal Labs.
That's exactly what I said, Mario. He's criticizing the natural education curve that every crypto investor goes through, which is, wow, Bitcoin's $120,000. What are some of these other assets about? And I think there's millions of people who are going to go on that journey here in 2025. But this was my response to the video that Raoul Pal put out. I said, the XRP criticism, it's getting out of hand. Let's just stay focused on the facts. Up 440% in just 9 months. The Ripple lawsuit was a victory. Stablecoins RLUSD and USDC are live on the XRP ledger. The EVM sidechain is officially live and has over $100 million operating on chain. And there are 19 different XRP ETFs sitting at the SEC waiting for approval today, guys. So I'd love to see ones in chat if you believe XRP reaches double digits in the calendar year of 2025. Twos in chat if you simply think it does not happen. But I'm going to give a big shout out to one of our friends in MICKLE, Mario, because he's predicting not only is that going to occur, Bitcoin investors are going to be distraught by the XRP gains that are on the horizon. And here's what he had to say. They are so afraid of XRP that they won't even use the all-time XRP to Bitcoin chart. They need to manipulate the data because they hate the truth. That is what MICKLE said. The truth is, for the vast majority of XRP's history, you were better off buying XRP than Bitcoin. And what does this pairing tell us, Mario? In moments of parabolic momentum for the crypto market, when Bitcoin is trading down and sideways, it is XRP that is one of the most profitable digital assets. And MICKLE outlines it perfectly. We have not entered that euphoric moment. So whether you're a Bitcoin investor, a Cardano investor, an Ethereum investor, they're looking at what's happening in the XRP community and they're saying, I want a piece of that action. And I think they're concerned about how quickly things are changing for a community that just 6-8 months ago was an outcast. Now they're sitting down and having meetings with the president. What do you think about MICKLE's price prediction and how, once again, from a profitability standpoint, it has consistently been better to buy XRP than Bitcoin?
Well, I obviously, being an XRP enthusiast and researcher as well. So it's not just, I'm not going to speak just from an enthusiasm or enthusiastic approach, but it's also from a researcher's approach, somebody that has looked at this asset for such a long period of time and understands very well what's happening in the background. I agree with MICKLE. And, the Dave Portnoy type of scenario where you've got these people that are kind of coming into not just the market, but specifically XRP. It's not just Dave. I actually had a situation this weekend, Abs, where I was talking to somebody that I had just met, and they were like, "Oh, I do invest in crypto and stuff." And then I asked him, "Are you invested in XRP?" And he's like, "I was for 3 years, but then I sold." And I'm like, "Why did you sell?" "Oh, because somebody told me it was a scam." I'm like, "What do you mean? What about it is a scam?" "Oh, I'm not sure, but I just heard it was a scam." I'm like, "So you didn't do any type of research? You just sold it because you heard it was a scam?" "Yeah, pretty much." So it just shows you that the most common crypto investor, or I guess, probably the majority, I don't know statistics here, so I'm not going to try to, make them up, but I feel like the most common crypto investor, it kind of they're just going with the flow of what they're hearing. And most of the time, what they're hearing is not accurate. That's why it's so important for you to go in and do your own research. If you do your own research at everything that's happening with XRP, XRPL, Ripple, and even macro crypto for that matter, you will see that these technologies are here to stay. You will see that XRP is here to stay. And there's a massive misconception. We can argue all day long about the holdings that Ripple has of XRP. Of course, that could be considered a concern, but it isn't an escrow account. There is a schedule to it for the release. And I think that, given the fact that we've gone all these years and Ripple being sued, and still they had an opportunity to really ditch XRP and the XRP community, they didn't do it. I really believe in this asset and everything that's potentially going to come in. So as far as an investment, I am so glad that I held on to my XRP throughout the years. I am so glad that I didn't get flooded out of this market. And yes, we could have jumped here, jumped there, but that's not what investing is. That's not what true investing is. True investing is putting your money where you believe it should be put and then sticking to your conviction. And if there's another opportunity that comes up, then, don't make a move just because you feel like, it's a gamble. Stick to your conviction. And I think that for me specifically, again, I speak from a little bit of a biased position, but I've done my research, and I would do it all over again if I had to.
Mario, there's a common saying: first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. And we just went through that journey with the SEC over these last couple of months. But I would tell the XRP community, get ready for more of these conversations, more criticism, more fake news, more truth that will need to be shared with the average retail investor. Because a lot of people who are coming into this market, Mario, they're getting caught in the Bitcoin echo chamber, and they just fall into the mindset that it's Bitcoin, maybe a little bit of Ethereum, but everything else is a scam. Look, a lot of these very famous crypto investors tell us that it's Bitcoin against everything else. Well, there's a new modern investor who understands the value of altcoins and understands how quickly this market can change. Just in the last 6 months, I said it earlier, XRP is up 440%. That doesn't happen in any other capital market on the planet. And I think that exact reason is why so many Bitcoin investors continue to be frustrated by the success of the XRP community, guys. Smash that like button if you're enjoying this content, because we're about to break down a whole nother portion of this episode, getting into the XRP ETFs and what could officially happen to the 2025 price targets we've been predicting. But let's start off right here. Bitcoin investors, once again, telling people it's a joke. What even is XRP?
Fortunately, last weekend, once again, asked me what I think of XRP. And
Every time.
it is hard to to be fair, if you look at the chart, I think XRP's gone from like $1 to $3, something like that. I don't really watch what it's done. But some people just look at that, and if that's their number go up, right, and they don't know anything about economics, about how these protocols and networks actually work, they're just going to look at it and be like, yeah, this thing was up, 300%. Well, why would I not buy it?
Do you hear that, Mario? So the tonality there, I think, is incorrect. This is an asset that not only traded down and sideways for the better half of 8 years, we just broke out of an 8-year bear market, essentially, where we were below $3.85 since the 2017 bull market. We even tested as low as 10 cents on the price chart during that time. So I think for people who have been here throughout this entire journey, while he's shrugging off 300% in 8 months, it's actually more like 1,000% in 10 months, right? And I think that's what a lot of XRP investors have seen. They've watched their $10,000 turn into 80. They've watched their $100,000 turn into nearly $1 million. And so I wouldn't devalue how important that is for long-term crypto investors, because this is the exact mindset that me and you have shared for years. You get in this market, you understand the technology, you wait for years. You don't get scared out by the raw emotions that occur during these bull markets, but instead you double down on the assets you own, and eventually you wake up 3, 4, 5, 7 years later, and your portfolio has done a 10, 12, 15, 35, 100x, depending on some of the assets that you're in. And what we're going to show you guys later on in this episode is how the XRP bull market, it's not just beginning, it hasn't even begun. We need to talk about the demand that will enter this asset in 26, 27, and 2028, Mario, leading me to believe that we're not only going to see a double-digit XRP, a triple-digit XRP is in the cards over the next half decade, guys. So ones if you agree, twos if you disagree. Mario, floor is yours.
Look, one of the arguments that I've been hearing consistently over the last few months, especially from the Bitcoin community, and this is not bashing the Bitcoin community, but the arguments is that XRP took basically 8 years to yield these returns, and that Bitcoin consistently over the years has yielded much better returns, right? But we can't, and I get it. I don't think that I even want to argue that, but the point is XRP had something that Bitcoin didn't, which was a lawsuit. It was a lawsuit by a government, which in this case was America. The SEC attacked Ripple, which ultimately attacked XRP, alleging it to be a security. And in that 2021 bull run, it completely missed it. The price action got completely destroyed. Liquidity got completely destroyed. It was delisted off of all major exchanges. There was no incentive, no excitement. It basically missed that bull run. Yes, it still went from like 17 cents to $1.90. So that was still a crazy move. But that only happened because the price came down crashing so much, and it ended up capturing a little bit of that liquidity from the altcoins. But I think that event alone is the main reason why we're standing here today. I'm standing here today. You're sitting here today talking about how in the last 8 years, XRP has essentially gone from, 30, 50 cents to $3.20, whatever it's at right now. It could have been much higher. If we didn't have the 2021 or late 2020 incident of the SEC suing Ripple, I think we would potentially be now in a double-digit XRP, having conversations about how XRP is sitting at double digits in the current state of this market. So, in my opinion, that's really why XRP has done what it's done in the last 8 years. And that's why, we continuously hear from the Bitcoin investors saying that Bitcoin has been a much better investment from a return perspective over years. If you put in $50,000 in 2018, you would essentially have had to wait all of this time, until now to be able to have some sort of significant return, as opposed to putting it into Bitcoin, you would have had a better return. True, right? So we can't argue with that part, Abs. But again, went through special circumstances. I think that if anything, that solidified XRP as an asset going forward. So could we have put our money elsewhere? Like I said before, Abs, absolutely. We could have put money into Solana. We could have put it into Bitcoin. And that's why diversification is so important. You shouldn't be just invested in XRP. You should be invested in multiple assets, multiple of these coins that you believe in, multiple of these projects and blockchains that you believe in. So that's kind of my spiel when it comes to XRP. Again, I wouldn't change anything because it's very easy to judge looking at the past, but judging the future and trying to predict the future, that's a whole different ballgame. So I did what I did, and I held XRP for as long as I did and still hold based on a belief system that I had. I didn't, have a crystal ball. I didn't know what the future was going to hold, but I do feel pretty certain about one thing, Abs, is that the future for assets, the future for XRP looks extremely bright. And if it takes, another 2 years, if it takes another 5 years, I think that we're headed in the right direction. And unless any real red flags arise for XRP, I don't see myself, jumping the boat like a lot of people did just because of price action. Price action should not be a motive to change your belief system in a project, because sometimes it can take a while, and having the patience to endure it is super important.
Oftentimes that patience pays off when it comes to the value of your portfolio, guys. And we saw it with XRP. We're trading at $3.60. We've traded as high as $3.60 in the calendar year of 2025, Mario. And I want to emphasize what you said. We are still undervalued. We should have passed our previous all-time high back during the 2021 bull market. But due to the lawsuit, due to the hyper suppression, and the fact that companies like MoneyGram and Bank of America that were working on the XRP ledger dropped that project because they did not want to be prosecuted by a government or a federal regulator. Well, now the tides have turned, and this is a major announcement. It just came out about 1 hour ago for the XRP community. The SEC has officially released their litigation response to the SEC versus Ripple case. Brad Garlinghouse, Chris Larson, and Ripple Labs. The case is officially dismissed. And more importantly, our listeners want to know, can Ripple sell XRP directly to institutions inside the United States? The answer is yes. Ripple can sell XRP directly to institutions in the United States, but only if the company complies with securities law by either registering the sales with the SEC or using a valid exemption such as Regulation D. But Mario, there's an even easier way to go around this. They can leverage a third party such as Uphold, right? They can do these transactions OTC behind closed doors by leveraging a third party. And I guess what everybody should know in the simplest of terms, XRP is free in the USA. Anybody can use this digital asset. And I think there's going to be dozens, if not hundreds of companies that go out, purchase XRP and add it to their balance sheets in the calendar year of 2025. But with that being said, we're going to wrap this episode up with a little ETF discussion. If you guys are enjoying this content, smash that like button and be sure to subscribe to the brand new Good Evening Crypto channel. This is Paul Barron talking about how XRP ETFs could destroy what Ethereum has already created. Here it is.
Why do you think XRP's ETF might perform differently if you kind of compare, I guess, Bitcoin and ETH right now, who are going head to head?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's really three different reasons why I believe that XRP is going to do well versus ETH, for instance. One of them is staking. So if you're actually a bit more crypto native, you're not going to buy an ETH ETF because you can go to one of the crypto exchanges or go somewhere off chain or actually on chain. You can get a 2 to 3% yield.
Right.
So why would you buy an ETF if you can get a yield on top of your token somewhere else? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, for sure.
And since XRP doesn't offer that, then it doesn't matter whether it's on an exchange, whether it's in an ETF or not. You're not losing out on anything. So that's reason number one.
Just to pause it, Mario. So basically what he's saying is that by using these ETFs, you're going to be able to generate a yield in a way that you can't just natively on the XRPL, but Ethereum already has that. You can already stake your Ethereum and earn a passive yield. So there's not as much demand for that underlying asset, but let's continue.
Number two, I just mentioned, it's really the category leader. So the category leaders that people can understand are going to make a lot more sense, whereas ETH has a lot more competition in its category. XRP has very little. So people are going to see that as the clear leader. It's done a lot to keep the technology upgraded, continue to move forward, to remain the leader. So, I think that's really, that's really that. And then really the third point here is the demand. and the community and the number of people that are following this thing. So, look, I think XRP's $5 billion the first month across the board. So we'll see how that goes, but I believe out of the gate it's definitely gonna outperform what ETH did out of the gate.
There you have it, Mario. And that's why for a very long time, I made the proclamation that eventually XRP will pass Ethereum just based on the new demand we're going to see from these American markets. Live chat, I would love to hear ones if you believe XRP passes Ethereum, twos in chat if you think that simply does not occur, but it's more valid than ever to look at this market and say that ecosystems like the XRP ledger has created are set to profit more than any other towards the back end of 2025. And did you hear what he said at the end of that clip that is so important? He anticipated $5 billion worth of new demand entering the XRP ledger in just the first month of these ETF products being live. And just to give a little bit of context here, guys, using the XRP market multiplier, we can see that if $5.3 billion of new inflows came into the XRP project, Mario, that would push the order books to a $60 XRP, taking us to nearly 3.6 trillion in total market cap. Stablecoins, ETF demand, and people like ourselves who are unwilling to sell their XRP, my belief is this is the journey for how XRP can pass a digital asset like Ethereum. What are some of your thoughts?
Well, my thought is that the landscape for XRP has definitely changed. There's a different air. There's a different feel to the air for XRP. It just feels like there's a lot more hype, a lot more interest. And obviously the developments have just been phenomenal and amazing, especially when you were an XRP investor during the dark times, during the times of getting sued by the SEC, and almost every news piece that was coming out was negative. So the last year has been extremely positive, a lot of good developments. And when it comes to Ethereum, like to touch on that a little bit, a lot of people have been anticipating kind of like Ethereum to be dying off. I don't personally think that that's the case. I think that Ethereum is just going through a bad phase, a phase of not a lot of excitement, not a lot of hype. I think that crypto right now is still majorly affected or moved by hype. So we're not at the phase of like utility, full-blown utility or anything like that. But Ethereum has done, Ethereum has kind of stolen the show over the last few weeks. It's up significantly. It finally decided to wake up, and there is no news. There is no upgrade to Ethereum. There is no like major announcements. It literally just proves to you that this market's still being moved by the hype, and even by people that understand kind of like how the flow of liquidity in this market works. Goes to Bitcoin and then altcoins. So in my opinion, I think that there is a lot of validity, and I think that there could be a better outcome to an XRP ETF when we were to, if we, for example, compare it to the ETH ETF, just because right now I feel like there's a lot more interest and excitement around XRP, the asset, versus the Ethereum, the asset. So that alone could obviously cause the inflows from that ETF, once approved and once launched, to be greater than the Ethereum one is. As far as the market cap multiplier, I mean, we'll have to wait and see if it really comes to fruition, if it's really true, if it's really going to spike the price like it does, like a lot of people anticipate. But looking at that screenshot, I gotta say, Abs, I got some cool stuff in the works for XRP people. I'm just gonna leave it like that. When it's ready, I'll release it. I'll let you know so you can let everybody know as well. But that screenshot has something to do with it. But I think that the one thing we can all agree on is that we're at the sort of pivotal point for crypto. We're moving from the negativity and from the headwinds, to quote Brad Garlinghouse, to the tailwinds. And in these tailwinds, they're going to be super important, because from this point forward, and as we get regulation, as we get clear rules of the road, the institutions are now really going to start looking at this from I can jump in and be compliant type of perspective, not how can I participate without breaking the law, without getting the SEC on my back or on our backs. This is going to be a different time. So again, I think the next couple of years, even the next few months, are going to be super pivotal. And technologies like XRP, where they're innovating within so many different sectors, with obviously starting with cross-border payments, but now being super focused as well with tokenization and many of the other things. Dude, I saw this video today that was so disturbing. Somebody sent it to me and asked me for my thoughts. thoughts. It was a very well professionally put together video that was basically talking about how XRP was going back to 50 cents because there was absolutely no need for it, because the original idea behind it to be a cross-border tool was being taken away by stable coins. So think about this for a second. People are listening. People are literally listening to those videos and thinking that it's true. But what rails do stable coins run on? As far as I'm concerned, USDC does not have its own blockchain. USDC, it is not its own network. So even as much as we can all agree that stable coins are definitely getting they're getting adopted, it's true, but it doesn't mean that XRP is useless, because if anything, and now the USDC launched on the XRPL, it just adds more value to XRPL. So that's why you got to be so wary of the videos and the things that you listen online, because it is not all true. You got to do your own research. So if anything, that video totally misleading. US stable coins, definitely a good thing, but that does not replace XRP. If anything, it adds to the utility of XRP.
Completely agree with you, Mario. And here's another part of it. RLUSD transactions, the Ripple US dollar stablecoin, burns a small amount of XRP on every single transaction. It burns at a minimum a single drop of XRP. Well, that works as a deflationary asset as well, which is the whole reason that Bitcoin got to where it is today. It's a deflationary asset, and they compare it to gold. Here's an XRP ETF, guys. As Bank of America inside sources are confirming, 100% chance we see an XRP ETF in the calendar year of 2025.
In the US, 11 XRP ETF filings are pending with the SEC. And Bloomberg and analysts are now assigning a 95% probability that at least one will be approved. Well, during the night, I've been on the phone, Bank of America contacts again, and I'm saying 100% that these ETFs will be approved. 100%. That's what.
So Mario, with the 100% XRP ETF confirmation, guys, if you believe we get an XRP ETF in 2025, smash that like button and support this program. But here's the billion, trillion, maybe even multiple billion-dollar question here, Mario. Will BlackRock file for an XRP ETF? And the latest report from a spokesperson at BlackRock is this. At this time, BlackRock does not have any plans to file an XRP or Solana ETF. So here's two things that come to mind when I read that quote, and I'll leave this on screen while we discuss it. Number one, it reminds me when JP Morgan back in 2017 was telling their investors or telling their clients, you will be fired if you go out and you purchase Bitcoin. I'm getting that same kind of vibe here from BlackRock, where so much is happening. So many big companies are filing for the XRP ETF that if BlackRock can get the XRP ETF approved, Mario, why would they not make this filing? So my belief is, yes, BlackRock does inevitably file, but here's the third thing that comes to mind. They are focused on something much bigger, which is the tokenization of real world assets. Mario, do you believe we get an XRP ETF, or is something bigger going on here?
Well, I'll speculate a little bit, Abs. BlackRock has a connection to Ondo, right? Ondo has a connection to Ripple, and even as early as last week, there was a featured video that Ripple put out where it was all about the CEO of Ondo. So I definitely, speculating, conspiracy theorist side of me will say that there is something else going on. The one thing that we could potentially, further speculate on is the fact that last year we heard Larry Fink saying that the tokenization of everything was going to take place, and that he's super excited about it and that it's the future. Well, then, that connection to Ondo, I believe it's a big one. So is the reason why BlackRock has not yet released or filed for an ETF, an XRP ETF, because they're working on something else? Maybe. Is it because they were waiting for the lawsuit to conclude? Maybe. Are these ETF filings, the delay for these ETF filings, is it because the SEC wanted to conclude the lawsuit against Ripple first before approving them? Maybe. I think all these things, have a lot of truth to them. I think that obviously the exciting part of it is that we're going to find out. And honestly, I think it's going to be sooner rather than later, Abs. I think that we've gotten to a point, especially with the lawsuit being finally, officially concluded with the SEC, that all of these questions are going to be answered very, very soon. The pressure's on. I think the demand is there too. There's definitely demand for XRP, the asset. And obviously over the course of the next few weeks and with some deadlines coming up in just a month or two, we will find out sooner rather than later. But if I was to put my hands on the fire, I would say, I think there's something else going on. I can't say for sure, but the connection between BlackRock, Ondo being right there in the middle with the connection to Ripple, I think that in and of itself is a bit telling.
Guys, if you enjoyed this content, smash that like button, subscribe to the brand new channel, and let us know underneath the video, does BlackRock file for an XRP ETF? We'll see you all in the next one.